How diddly do, neighborinos. Today I'm going to be talking about the DC multiverse. Yippee! The multiverse is a pretty tricky concept. It can be used to show alternate histories and parallel characters, and most importantly, introduce action figure variants. Now, the omniverse, on the other hand, is the collection of every multiverse, and a lot of people make this mistake, but there's only one omniverse, not multiple. And I believe that I have decoded the entire omniverse regarding the DC multiverse. I know exactly which universe is in which multiverse is where. I've figured it all, I've solved everything. But before I get into any of that, I want to talk about the three different versions of the comic storyline Crisis on Infinite Earths. Starting with the CW version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, I genuinely do not remember most of this. I think it just copied the comics plot mostly, but somehow took all the goofiest parts and made them more goofy. The way the Anti-Monitor is defeated in the end is so ridiculous and lacks any, build up or, thematic relevance. I understand that it's live action and it's on a TV show budget and there's only so much you can do, but special effects aren't the problem. They're not the selling point of the story. Two of the major deaths in the original comic are Flash and Supergirl. Obviously, they're not gonna kill off Flash and Supergirl. Okay, to be fair, they do kill off Green Arrow and he kinda stays dead. And one twist I can genuinely appreciate is that they made Kevin Conroy Batman evil. Obviously, no comic fan would suspect that he'd be the bad guy, but at the same time, I could see how some fans would look at that and go, "No, he can't be evil. You're disrespecting the original." Shut up! Shut the fuck up! The original Crisis is in no means a perfectly written story, but what really bothers me the most is that the Arrowverse didn't even try to improve on it. Speaking of the original, let's talk Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Crisis on Infinite Earths is hardly a masterpiece. It's a very good guys versus bad guys, good guys win, bad guys lose type of story, but there's really nothing wrong with that. Something kinda odd about Crisis is that even though it's meant to be the big crossover with all the DC heroes, it primarily focuses on a lot of either new or newly introduced characters. It's almost like the type of thing where it's like, "What's that? The main character can do this? Well, my OC can do it better!" The funniest part about that is that it's actually true. Crisis is kind of Marv Wolfman's fanfiction, since he said that he had this idea since he was a kid, and the Monitor was originally going to be a villain called the Librarian who would collect all the data on every hero from every universe. And I know it's considered cringy and all, but come on, admit it. Who didn't have their own self-insert furry OC that would upstage notable pop culture characters when they were a kid? Now, if the name Marv Wolfman sounds familiar, it should, because he is the mind that brought us the current iteration of the Teen Titans that everyone loves so dang much. There is even an entire episode of Teen Titans Go dedicated to him and George Perez, whom also illustrated Crisis on Infinite Earths as well as Teen Titans. He also trolled the comics code rules one time, where because of censorship they weren't allowed to show werewolves because they were too gruesome or whatever, so he got around this rule by putting himself, a wolf man, into the story. Again, Crisis ain't exactly a nuanced story, but that's fine, because the whole point of the story is mainly about perseverance in the face of total annihilation, as well as working together towards a common goal. And I'd say one of the best parts about Crisis is the Crisis itself. The main goal of the story, sure, it stays the same, which is, save everyone, but it does change and evolve throughout. First there's the antimatter wave, and it's like, okay, well, we stopped that, and it's like, oh, well, now time is collapsing, so now we gotta stop that. And then, oh no, all the bad guys team up, and now they're invading different worlds, now we gotta stop that. And so, every time the heroes come close to winning, something sets them back farther. Really, the main appeal of Crisis is wondering how the heroes will win, because it does a pretty good job building the conflict and making you think maybe they won't get out of it. I mean, obviously they do, they always do, but not really supposed to go into a story with that kind of mindset. Painfully ironically, the ending is actually one of the weaker parts of the story because it's kind of confusing. I mean, it's not nearly as awful as the Arrow ending, but at the same time, it's pretty vague and doesn't really explain how the universe resets properly. Now, the whole reason Crisis was written is to blow up all those unneeded extra alternate universes and then just keep things down to one continuity so things would be less confusing. And apparently, it was Marv Wolfman's vision to completely reboot the universe, meaning all the dead characters would come back to life and all the living characters would basically get their memories erased. So it would be a full on reset. But for whatever reason, it was changed and that wasn't the case. So in New Earth, the new post crisis continuity, certain things were the same, but certain things were different, and it was never clear which was which, so it only made things more confusing instead of less confusing. Finally, there is one nitpick that I have with the series overall, and it's that, okay, there are certain moments where you can tell they're like trying to set up a character for later, and then other moments where it's like, okay, that's clearly just a cameo. They're not really meant to be important to the story. But there are some moments that kind of blend the lines, and you can't really tell which is which. Early on, they mentioned that Raven has gone missing, and so you're gonna think, oh, she's pretty powerful. Is she gonna show up again later on? Nope, they never bring it up ever again. So, yeah. In conclusion, it's alright. And finally, we have the three-part animated movie adaptation, simply titled Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. Things officially began with the animated movie Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox. It's an adaptation of the comic Flashpoint, which served as a reboot for the wider DC universe. It's also the only good adaptation of Flashpoint. No, no, we didn't ask for this! We didn't ask for this! Okay, look, I know Ezra Miller is literally the worst type of human being, and I know this movie tries to bank on Bat nostalgia, and I know this 2 hour schlock fest is really boring and has all kinds of nonsense exposition, but honestly, there are some good character moments here and there that, if properly workshopped and nourished, could have been a lot better, but they weren't. We could have gotten Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Batman, but no, let's just bring back the old one because of timelines or some stupid shit. As for the CW version, throughout the first season, Flash is trying to find his mother's killer, and at the end is given the option to go back in time and save her. But he encounters his future self who holds out his hand, stopping him. The last second, Flash realizes that this is destined to happen either way, so he returns to the present and defeats his enemy, Reverse Flash. I really like this because it shows that a story doesn't always have to follow the comic source material to an exact T for it to still be a good story. And then in season 2, they threw all that shit out the window and did a Flashpoint anyway. In the original comic storyline, Flash is motivated to travel back in time and prevent his mother's death, following the revelation that it was Reverse Flash who killed her. In the animated movie, Reverse Flash is a key figure, but his relation to the death of Barry's mom is never really specified, nor do we actually see how or why Flash went back in time and made this change. The movie follows Flash as he's stuck in an alternate timeline where everything sucks and the world's about to end. Batman's a drunk serial killer, Aquaman wants to nuke the world, Wonder Woman's a tyrant, Superman was kept in a box his whole life, and worst of all, Barry's gay. Oh, the horror! Batman caps Reverse Flash, so non-Reverse Flash is able to go back in time and restore the universe to its normal self. Well, not really, because the new timeline wasn't exactly like the original unaltered timeline, so there would then be a series of movies known as the DC Animated Movie Universe, which follow this new timeline. Now, I know some of you will be really disappointed by hearing this, but I'm not really the hugest fan of the DCAMU. I don't want to say that they're bad, but they just feel very, I don't know, edgelord. There's a very specific type of person these were made for. But this video is not about that universe, so I won't linger on it any longer than a lingering potion from the hit game Terraria. It was concluded with the ninth movie, Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. If you just fact checked and there weren't actually 9, I know, I just didn't bother checking for myself. Unless there actually are 9, in which case, go me! Now, if you're someone who's a fan of the DCAMCU, LMNOP, whatever the fuck, and you didn't really like it when I said that it was, like, too edgelord, that's fine. You can disagree with me on that. But one thing that you have to, at the very least, admit is that Justice League Dark Apocalypse War is most certainly an edge fest, with characters getting killed off left and right, and it even ends with the heroes losing. Well, it almost ends with the good guys losing. Constantine convinces Flash to travel back in time and reset everything again. And what's even more stupid and annoying is that the movie begins with a Bible quote of all things, where it's something like, Lord, give me the strength to change what I can and accept what I cannot. But that has nothing to do with the actual movie. At the end, the heroes don't accept the reality of the situation that they've lost and that the world is coming to an end or anything. Nah, Flash goes back in time and changes something he's not supposed to be allowed to change. They outright just contradict the message of the freaking Bible quote. We don't even see what he changes or the new world that is created. It just ends there. That isn't entirely honest. We actually do get to see the new universe in a different movie! The Tomorrowverse, as it is known, would be the main setting of the next few DC animated movies released throughout the 2020s. Now, unlike those pesky New 52 movies, the Tomorrowverse was a lot more colorful, hopeful, optimistic, and focused on a lot of the older, more retro heroes from the Golden Age and Silver Age of comics, which are some of my favorites. So, naturally, I'd absolutely love the Tomorrowverse movies, right? Right? Well, the thing is, they had one pretty big flaw, and it's that they were kinda bad. I'm not trying to look for things to complain about, and some of them, like Man of Tomorrow and Long Halloween, were actually pretty solid, but a lot of them were also just painfully mediocre, and I ended up quickly losing faith in this universe and didn't really care to consistently watch them. But when it was announced that its finale would be a three-part Crisis on Infinite Earths, I knew I just couldn't miss it. I went into this fully expecting to hate it. I thought it would be a lazily written, cash grab nostalgia fest. Remember Batman Beyond? Yeah, I remember. Remember Aya? Yeah, I remember. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but after finishing all three parts, I actually kind of enjoyed it. The Crisis movies choose to optimize their characters, which is a good change, but like I said before, my favorite part about the original Crisis story was the Crisis itself, and in the movies, the Crisis feels like a third wheel. The first movie is mostly just Flash bouncing around the space time continuum. We get an origin for the Justice League, as well as Amazo, who is portrayed as sympathetic. In the first 20-30 minutes of the movie, it can be kind of hard to follow, but eventually everything is revealed and explained, and it makes more sense the longer you watch it, basically. There's a very random detail that's easy to overlook but creates a huge plot hole where he time slips again, and then Iris is like, oh, are you time slipping again? So, she knows that he's just bouncing around, he's pinballing around the space time continuum, but doesn't really, care. And instead, that he's been doing this for his entire life, and, they just kind of gloss over that, which it feels like something you really shouldn't gloss over. Part 2 is mostly a bunch of flashbacks detailing Supergirl and Psycho Pirate's origin stories, and no, they don't really move the plot forward or contribute to the crisis a whole lot, but they do serve to flesh out the characters more and better understand them. I think one of the best improvements on the original comic are the character deaths. As I said before, Flash and Supergirl are two of the big ones, and spoilers, but yes, they both die here as well. In the original, sometimes it felt like characters died just because they had to, whereas in the movies, whenever characters die, it feels much more properly built up to and emotional, and it actually serves the greater plot. Well, main characters anyway. People like Negative Woman and Uncle Marvel just get wiped off the face of the universe. A lot of those new characters that were introduced during Crisis are instead merged with pre-existing characters, so Supergirl is now Harbinger, and John Constantine is now Pariah. Actually, speaking of Harbinger, did you know that in the comic she fought Snowflame? That one cocaine guy from that one comic? If you think that's bad, one of her other enemies is a guy whose literal power is giving people HIV. In concept, I really do like how the Tomorrowverse movies are kind of meant to be the multiverse saga, and how there are other movies that are still connected to it just in other universes. It was all building up to the big crisis, but at the same time, a lot of times it felt like it was trying way too hard to set up the crisis instead of actually telling a good story. The comic, of course, had like 87 billion characters, so the movie had to take out a few, but I feel like the amount that we got was still a lot, but also well balanced. I find it kind of funny how, in both the comic and the animated version, Dr. Light is just a random mean lady that the Monitor kidnapped and went, well, you can see the entire light spectrum now, have fun. Kamandi and Solovar share two scenes together, and I'm willing to bet you probably don't know who either of them are, but just trust me when I say that they bounce off each other perfectly. The thing is, however, they get like the bare minimum of character development, and it's not very great, but I like that they were at the very least included, despite not being the most popular or notable characters. One example of how to make the characters work is with the Bat family. In Earth 2 continuity, Batman and Catwoman had a daughter known as the Huntress, and Robin is also his own hero and all grown up, while Batman himself is dead. And if my memory serves me correctly, they never actually interact with Earth 1 Batman, or at the very least don't interact with him that much. In the movie, not only does Batman interact with Huntress and Earth 2 Robin, but the fact that they used to know this dead, altered version of him is the entire point of, like, conflict to their relationship. So later, whenever Psycho Pirate begins driving all the Earths insane, another plot point from the comics that kinda happens just to happen, here it actually feels a lot more earned since there's actual context behind it. A con is, once again, with the Crisis. I feel like you never really know how many Earths there are and which Earth is what. Even whenever you do see an Earth, it's just kind of a backdrop. They never really explore it or do anything with it. It can even be pretty hard to tell who's supposed to be from what Earth. At one point, there's a Joker shown on Earth 2, but then later on Earth 10, there's another Joker that's exactly the same. So are they the same one? If so, how did he get there? And aside from Lex Luthor, the villains in general don't really do anything. They're just kind of there, which is fine. They don't have to contribute all that much, but I thought it was really fun how in the original they kept trying to, like, exploit the Crisis and take over different universes. Yeah, there's also a lot of continuity with the older movies. Not with everyone, but with like a good few of them. I saw some and didn't see others, but I'd say for me, I wasn't too bothered by it, but that's just because this sort of thing doesn't really bother me if I can just fill in the blanks on my own. But if it bothers you, then you might want to just not skip this entire thing anyway. As I keep repeating, the original just kind of handled the crisis better. Like, in the movies, we're told that, like, there's lots of overpopulation and less resources and stuff like that, but it feels like we never really fully grasp it. Like, in the original, at one point, a new wildcat is introduced, and she kind of thinks to herself, like, is it really worth, like, going around saving people if the universe is gonna fall apart anyway? But then decides, yes, it is worth it, and keeps, helping them, and it's like, we never get anything like that in the movies. We never really get a grounded perspective on the crisis. At one point, time itself begins to unravel, which, happened in the comic, but here we just kind of see it happening for like one scene and then it's never brought up again. Towards the end, the heroes are like, I know, we can fix everything with the miracle machine, the ultimate plot device. Except then they're like, oh no, but it was in the 36th or 31st century and the future got erased. What do we do? So I thought, okay, so clearly they're going to find a way to navigate the time storms and then go to the future and find it, right? No, they do something else. The Anti Monitor is a villain that I think has a really cool design. Well, used to have a really cool design. But while Darkseid is an interesting, charismatic, and pure evil antagonist, the Anti-Monitor's just kind of boring. What's that? You're a giant evil armored robot that devours whole planets? Join the fucking club! Now, his design is a little more simplistic than what I was expecting, but it looks fine. It's kind of a nice blend of the older design and the newer, objectively worse one. But they made a change to his character that, as a character, he is even more boring, but as a concept, he's actually quite fascinating. Who is the Anti Monitor? Why is the multiverse ending? And what happened at the end of Justice League Dark Apocalypse War? Well, remember how in Endgame they teased the idea of killing baby Thanos? Yeah. Constantine had placed a poison spell on the Flash and sent him back in time to kill baby Darkseid. Removing Darkseid from existence resulted in the universe being fractured, becoming the multiverse, and it kept replicating over and over again even though it wasn't really made to do that. It's a lot like that one SCP thing where the multiverse is like slowly killing itself, so you have to blow it up because it's literal cancer. So the Anti-Monitor isn't really evil, he's just an antibody, for the universe itself. And like I said before, this change is kind of good and bad. It makes him a lot more interesting than just pure negativity, destruction embodied, but also it makes him less of a character. He only has like one line of dialogue in the entire trilogy. The heroes accept that the Anti-Monitor has to do its job and destroy the remaining universes, so what they do is they use the Miracle Machine to create one new universe that's immune to the antimatter that can, serve as a new home for everybody. I admire the choice to not have it end with a big, climactic final showdown. Instead, the ending is much more simple and emotional, but I feel like the heroes don't have a final challenge that they need to overcome before, everything's fine. And the Anti-Monitor, we never really get a conclusion to him either. I know he's not really a character, but it's not like, all I really asked for is just a single scene of him, like, turning around and looking at the last Earth or something. I don't know. The ending, I think, is probably the best Crisis ending, not just out of all the adaptations, but in general. With the Arrowverse, the multiverse was rebooted, which is kind of stupid, because if the whole point was to destroy the multiverse, and then it just ends up getting brought back anyway, then what was the point of any of that? And in the comic, one Earth was created, but it was pretty vague about what was different and what was the same, whereas here with the Tomorrowverse, it said that this new Earth is completely new, but all the pre-existing characters were kind of absorbed and assimilated into it. Like I keep saying before, in the comics, whenever New Earth was created, some things were the same, some things were different. What do I mean by that? Well, on Earth 1, Barry Allen Flash lived in Central City, whereas on Earth 2, Jay Garrick lived in Keystone City. And in New Earth, both Central City and Keystone City existed alongside each other. The people of that world had memories of both Barry Allen and Jay Garrick. However, people like Huntress and Earth 2 Robin did not exist in that universe. Huntress went to her apartment building, and it wasn't hers. And because of that, those two characters kind of had to be killed off, but it ended up feeling really like anticlimactic and forced. By having all the characters merge with their counterparts and all their memories being erased, it completely fixes that issue. Thematically, it works very well. Having the heroes accept that they can't save the entire multiverse and that they can't remove Darkseid from existence is actually pretty good, and it even is tied into Superman's parents, how they weren't able to save the entirety of Krypton, but they were able to save their son. It, actually does the whole thing that the Bible quote said, where it's like, change what you can and accept what you cannot. What do you know? Payoff. It only took us 5 fucking years. I would have liked to see maybe a bit more of the New Earth, but that's not really a big deal. And of course, I can't talk about Crisis Part 3 without the Kevin Conroy scene at the end, the very last Kevin Conroy line before passing away. I'm not gonna spoil exactly what he says, but literally his last words are like, "I Batman." And I thought that was kinda cheesy, but look, if anyone's allowed to say "I'm Batman" the cheesiest way, it's gonna be Kevin Conroy. They also finally give payoff to the Green Lantern Hawkgirl ship, though this isn't entirely canon. I know I haven't been the biggest Tomorrowverse enjoyer, or really the biggest DCAMU enjoyer, because the solo movies are the best, but I really appreciated what they did with Crisis Parts 1, 2, and 3, and yeah, it was a very satisfying ending. Is it my favorite ending? No. Is it my favorite crossover? No. And if you're not super into DC Comics like I am, you probably won't get anything out of it either. What else can I say about it? Oh yeah, they also had giant Dalmatians. I never saw those before watching this movie, but giant Dalmatians. And yeah, that was my Crisis on Infinite Earths review of all the versions of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Okay, well, now that all the weirdos are gone, we can get down to the actual purpose of this video, and that is determining which universes are canonically connected to which multiverse. This should be fun, or painful, or both. Starting with the comics, I'd say there are about three main multiverses, starting with the pre-crisis multiverse, which started in 1935 and ended in 1985, so exactly 50 years. Here you'd see plenty of iconic locations such as Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, and what the hell? New Earth would eventually receive its own multiverse of, I think, 52. Maybe at some point they changed it back to infinity. I don't really know. Some universes were completely new, others were loosely based on pre crisis versions, and others were pretty much an exact copy of their pre crisis version. Then Flash does his whole alternate timeline Flashpoint thing, and then the second timeline after that is the New 52. And in case you didn't know, it's called the New 52 because it's a new set of 52 Earths. I just noticed this little review from USA Today. It just says, epic. Once again, we get pre crisis universes, new universes, and exact duplicate universes. The Speed Force is a form of energy that flows between all Earths. It supplies the speedsters with their powers, which allow them to move super fast, regenerate, and even time travel. Similarly, there is a pool of near infinite energy which can be accessed through emotions. Each emotion has its own color scheme and even a giant titan monster animal thing to correlate with it. There are also 7 magical realms guarded by the wizard Shazam, who resides in the Rock of Eternity at the center of the multiverse. Then there's the world of the gods. I actually forgot exactly what these places are called. I just call them overrealms, but outside the multiverse there are 8 overrealms, which consist of places like Apocalypse, New Genesis, Heaven, Hell, all that kind of stuff. And basically gods live there, and they create avatars of themselves that exist in each universe. There you'll also find the Sandman, who lives in a realm called like the Dreaming, which is the embodiment of dreams, and he's also the brother of Death itself. And finally, we have the Presence, aka God, the classic Judeo Christian God which outranks all the others. God, why'd I say that? Anyway, what I think happened with the Presence is that originally the multiverse was just a bunch of energy, and when that energy created life, that life began to believe, and that belief resulted in the energy gaining a sentience, becoming the Presence, everywhere, all at once, all the time, always, since the beginning till the end. There have been dozens of other big multiverse crises and soft reboots and whatever between all these, but if I even so much as try to comprehend all that, my brain will explode. But forget all that, because apparently Dr. Manhattan went back in time and, like, created every plot hole or some shit. I'm so fucking done with this, goddammit. Universes like the DCAU and Young Justice have been claimed to exist inside the comics, but I can definitively prove that they don't. The Source Wall is a giant inescapable death trap made of Jack Kirby drawings that surrounds the entire multiverse, and it definitively, in universe, keeps the comic multiverse separate from everything else. This, however, has not stopped other multiverses from the Omniverse to leak in anyway, such as the Marvel Multiverse and, oh my god, more Edgelord fanfiction! Moving away from the comic multiverses onto probably one of the easiest ones to decode, the live-action multiverse. Most of these are pretty contained, so we don't really gotta stress about what is and isn't canon. Most of these connections are thanks to the Arrowverse. We see variations of Batman 66, Batman 89, and a warped Dark Kingdom Come-esque version of Superman Returns. At one point, we see low-budget Flash bump into sex offender Flash. This implies that the DCEU exists in the post-crisis version of the Arrowverse. So all this implies that there's only one, I guess technically two-ish, live-action multiverses, which makes this very easy. The Titans and Doom Patrol TV shows have had a crossover before, but they are not canon to each other since they were explicitly shown to be different Earths at the end of the Arrowverse crisis. At this point in the video, you should be familiar with the box office hit film The Flash, but something you may not know is that that film featured various cameos from butt-ugly CGI heroes. All their actors all either didn't know they were going to be in it, or are literally deceased. Because VFX artists running on 2 hours of sleep and one frappuccino were forced to desecrate the graves of Adam West and Christopher Reeve, we are left with Batman 66, Batman 89, and the original Superman movies, which are debatably the same universe as Superman Returns. This is surprisingly consistent with the Arrowverse. Who asked for this? Who was in the theater and genuinely happy to see Nicolas Cage Superman from a movie that was canceled and never got made and looks like a freaking porno? Now, moving on to animation, this is when things get really complicated and really interesting. Now, in Hollywood live action land, you gotta fork over the big bucks so noteworthy actor can make their 5-second cameo and then collect their paycheck and leave. But in the realm of animation, you can draw everyone, which means that you don't have to. Okay, hold on, roll it back a bit. Can someone explain to me why Robert Downey Jr. is dressed as MF Doom? Because the mask isn't even that accurate. Without a doubt, the most notable DC animated universe has got to be, well, the DC animated universe, or DCAU for short. DCAU, it rolls off the tongue so well, it's like MCU. The DCAU consists of quite a sizable amount of things. The hell's the Zeta Project? I feel like the DCAU is the perfect example of how an interconnected universe doesn't always have to be a lazy cash grab. Yes, there is continuity, but it's not super strict that you have to know everything, and a lot of the stories can still stand on their own. Surprisingly, they actually haven't encountered that many alternate universes. What I absolutely love about this universe is that it isn't afraid to stand on its own. It's not stressing to be one-to-one with the comics, nor is it constantly referencing or trying to connect to other things. But that really is what makes the DCAU so special. Other stuff will constantly reference and parody it and whatever, but it never references anything outside of itself. And that's because it takes itself seriously. I don't mean that in the sense where it's always stoic and never lighthearted or never fun. I mean that just in the sense that it respects itself. What I'm trying to say is that the DC animated universe is just so specific and so standalone, I feel like it has to be its own multiverse. Well, that and because Amazo tore the entire thing apart and then put it back together. The Tomorrowverse multiverse got kind of complicated, but there is some definitive evidence that proves it's completely separate. You know, we see the DCAU, Teen Titans, the solid JJ universe, all of which are, of course, blown to hell. Watchtower Database, great channel by the way, found a detail that does prove that the DCAU as well as Super Friends are not in the Tomorrowverse. Both the Super Friends and the animated universe contain a dark side, and it's a very big plot point that the Tomorrowverse multiverse doesn't have any dark side, so this definitively proves that they are a separate canon. This is something I purposefully didn't mention earlier because I was debating it for a while, but I've come to the conclusion that there are 3 animated multiverses: the DCAU, the Tomorrowverse, and then just the general cartoon multiverse. And I'm telling you this now because this is when things get a little off the rails. Usually, Batman the Brave and the Bold or Teen Titans Go would be referencing all sorts of other shows. Teen Titans Go did that one thing with Young Justice, whatever the hell that even was, and Brave and the Bold can be seen here alongside The Batman, Batman Beyond, Batman the Animated Series, what were the ones? The Scooby-Doo Batman, Adam West Batman, it looks like 89 Batman, and Dark Knight Returns Batman. I think that's all of them. Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans featured quite a few cameos, but I'd argue most of them are either insignificant or non-canon, apart from one very important cameo that is canon and does hold a very crucial detail to mapping out this whole multiverse thing. Here we see several Batmen: Batman the Animated Series, Beware the Batman, Batman 66, The Batman, and hey wait, who's that in the back? That's not a Batman, that's Owlman, more specifically the version from Crisis on Two Earths voiced by James Woods. If you haven't seen Crisis on Two Earths, Owlman, an evil Batman from the other Earth, wants to collapse the entire multiverse by destroying a specific world known as Prime Earth, and there is zero mention of any Prime Earth that connects all the universes in the Tomorrowverse or DCAU or anywhere else. In the Arrowverse, there is technically an Earth Prime, but that's a completely different thing. The quote-unquote Prime Universe is a title that DC and even many other things have used over and over again, but the thing is, there can't be more than one Prime Universe because that completely defeats the point of a Prime Universe, so the only other explanation is that it has to be a separate multiverse. You think that revelation was big? This next one will blow your socks off. For the 75th anniversary of Batman, Darwin Cook, rest in peace, created a Batman Beyond short in which Terry McGinnis fought an evil android version of the BTAS Batman. Of course, Batman destroys the machine, stopping its reign of terror, only for it to then be revealed that whoever sent it had actually sent more androids, and then we see this. At first glance, we see the usual suspects 66, 89, The, Beware, Dark Knight Returns, but let's stop and think, what exactly does this mean? Now, at first glance, this seems pretty strange, like, what's going on here? But I think if you break it down, it's pretty obvious to tell what's happening. Hardak escaped his demise in 92 and is now traveling the multiverse, replacing Batman with evil androids and creating an army of evil bat robots to take over the entire universe. This is weird, right? Like, why would an event this big and this important just be a random off screen thing that never gets brought up? Unless it isn't an off screen thing, because the entire universe it's set in is an off screen universe. Whenever the Go Titans meet the animated series Batman, it's not the actual animated series universe, multiverse, DCAU Batman, it's an alt, just like the Tomorrowverse Batman. And I'd say the idea of alts is probably one of the biggest takeaways in this entire video. How are Batman 66 and Batman 89 in almost every live action and cartoon multiverse, when in universe it'd be physically impossible for them to be the same character? Simple. It's not. They're different versions of the exact same character. You know that version of Dark Knight Returns Batman that keeps cameoing in all the cartoons? I don't think that's the version from the comics that's canonically set in an alternate universe. I think that's the version from the standalone animated two-part movie. Batman Beyond and Batman the Animated Series are sometimes shown as two separate realities in this multiverse stuff, but in universe it doesn't make any sense since Beyond is supposed to be the future of animated. So is this an oversight on the creators? Probably, but I also take it as a sign that there could be multiple DCAUs. Inconsistencies with the serial numbers, like Super Friends is supposed to be Earth 508, even though sometimes the DCAU is Earth 508, even though most of the time it's Earth 12. I dedicated like half an entire video talking about how the 66 version of Two-Face has had 3 different origin stories, and I guess we know why now. If an event as specific as Flashpoint can happen so many times in the Omniverse, even so many different crises, then is it really that hard to believe that there's 2 Supermen that are exactly the same and have the exact same life and adventures, just one has a mullet? So what am I really trying to say here? What's this video even about? Are you saying that every single second of any movie or TV show I watch is actually going to be a different universe, an entire different multiverse, and I shouldn't just pay attention to continuity at all because any error could always be explained away with that? Well, no, because clearly paying way too much attention is how I made this video in the first place. I guess what I'm really trying to say is that if you ever write a world, you're going to give it rules, and sooner or later you're going to break those rules, and you'll need to find an explanation, so you might make different universes. But then you're going to make more and more and more, and then, sooner or later, you gotta give that multiverse rules. And what happens with all the rules? Eventually they break, and you just have to keep doing that over and over and over again. But that's the thing with fiction. It's an inversion of our world. Our world is just rules, limited everything. Only this can happen. But in the world of fiction, the omniverse, the twilight zone, the realm of imagination, there is infinite possibilities. And anything can happen. No rules. Well, I believe I've made my point. And also my review on the other thing that I forgot I did because this video is so long. But in actuality, this is barely scratching the surface. This is only the tip of the iceberg to, to the endless omniverse. I could keep going, I could keep falling down rabbit holes and explaining more connections, but I won't. I could, I absolutely could, but I won't. I could go in detail about how Batman the Brave and the Bold connects to Scooby-Doo, which technically connects to Courage the Cowardly Dog, which technically connects to Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, but I don't gotta. I don't gotta. No, not that one. Or that one. Yeah, that one. You see, this one crosses over specifically BTAS with the 2012 Ninja Turtles, which connects to the greater Ninja Turtles multiverse. But I won't talk about it. Like, I swear, I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna talk about any of that. Let's just not mention how Lego Spider-Man is canon to the wider Marvel multiverse, whereas Lego Batman is only specifically canon to the Lego multiverse, which may or may not be just a kid's imagination. I won't. You can't make me. So anyway, I guess overall, I'd say that like 2 out of 3 of the versions of Crisis are pretty good. I unfortunately can't say I like recommend them because unless you know the lore and know the characters and all that stuff, you're probably just gonna be lost the whole way through. So there's that. But yeah, I guess if you're not gonna watch any of those, at least you can say you've walked away from this video with a better understanding of the multiverse and the greater omniverse at work. Because if not, then you just wasted an hour of your time. And I make no money off these videos anyway, so did I. I hope you're happy, fucking asshole.